Hello, everybody. Today we're going to take an early look at a couple of polls for 2028. We're going to mostly see who Democrats are looking to put up, but we're also going to take a look at the Republicans. And as we get more into the holidays, I probably should take a break. I know that's what a lot of other people are going to be doing. It makes sense. But for now, I'm going to try to keep putting out videos. So let's start here with this poll from Emerson. And this is the first national poll since the election. It says Trump favorability jumps post-election. 2028 election kicks off with Harris and Vance leading primaries. That makes sense. Those two are going to be the most high-profile successors, although Harris did just run and she failed. So it's highly up for debate if she's going to be the strongest candidate going forward. So let's get down into it. The first part here does cover approval ratings. It looks like Trump does have a honeymoon spike. He's at 54% favorable. That's up 6 points pre-election. What about the current president, Joe Biden? Well, he's down there at 36%. That's a 4-year low according to Emerson. His disapproval is at 52. So what about some of the subgroups? Well, it says Trump does his strongest with voters aged 40 to 59, with 60% viewing him favorably compared to 48% among those over 70. Notably, his favorability has risen among younger voters, with 55% of those under 30 expressing a favorable opinion. It is notable because usually Republican presidents do worse with younger voters and they do better with older voters. Not necessarily the case here. Trump is doing his best with middle-aged voters, but this is also very preliminary. He's not even in office yet. Things could change in a hurry. They could even go up higher, but it's not at all going to be surprising if he dips under 50%. I'm actually expecting that. It says men view Trump favorably at 61%. That is pretty high compared to women at 48. 59% of white voters view Trump favorably, along with 53% of Hispanic voters and 28% of black voters. Those are also some impressive stats for Trump. Regarding the election results, 46% were surprised, 54% were not surprised. If you break that down by party, it's going to be 67% of Harris voters that were surprised, 71% of Trump voters were not surprised. Keeping with the theme here, I'm going to say those numbers are not surprising. So now that that's out of the way, what about 2028? It's an extremely long way off. But who are the frontrunners going to be for the Dems? Well, here's a 400 sample size poll of Democratic primary voters. It's a big margin of error of plus or minus 4.9. But the frontrunner is going to be Kamala Harris at 37%. Now, right behind Harris is undecided. That's at 35%. After that, it's way down from there. Everybody else is only in single digits. That's going to be led by California Governor Gavin Newsom at 7%. After that, you're either looking at Pete Buttigieg or someone else at 4%. Everyone else is at 3% or less. So I don't think this tells us anything at all. I think this is all going to change a lot over the next 2 or 3 years. But given Harris just took the loss, and after she just saw Trump come back and claim victory, there's always a chance she could come back and do it again in the future. But there's bound to be a huge split here. Either Democrats are going to say she had an abbreviated campaign and she only lost by a little bit. She's the easy choice to get it done next time at a full campaign. And the other side of that is going to say, what are you talking about? She just took the loss to the worst candidate in the world. That's going to be Trump. She flip-flopped too much. She cozied up to the establishment too much. She already did nothing in 2020. There's no chance I'm going to support her for 2028. I can understand how some people are going to come out on both sides of that, but I would much more easily understand the latter. She did already run in a primary. That was good in 2020 to see everybody going at it. She tried to occupy the progressive lane, but that was going to be won by Bernie. So after that, and then her loss here in 2024, if Harris does get in, I think it's going to be unlikely she'd be able to win that nomination. I can't say there's no chance. I would just say that it's unlikely. Even Bernie Sanders is on this list with 2%. He's in his 80s and his heyday is likely in the past. But that's the kind of energy the Democrats are going to need. I think they're going to need somebody anti-establishment, more economically populist, somebody that at least partially rejects the identity politics associated with the left. That's somebody I think would have a great chance to win the nomination. Now, like in 2020, Democrats might just say they want to win. They don't care about populism. They just want to get back in power. So they could go with someone a little bit more safe but popular, like Governor Josh Shapiro. He seems like he'd be a strong candidate, but I don't know if he'd be able to win a primary and win over more progressive voters. At some point in the future, I think we could probably do a tier ranking for these types of candidates. But I always hear about Michelle Obama being somebody who can win a general election. She's only at 2% on here, and I'm a little surprised to see Tim Walz, who was the running mate of Harris. He's only at 1% on here. At this point, his name ID should be high with Democrats, but he might just fade quickly into the background and have no staying power. AOC, I think, is going to be too young. Andy Bashir, I think, is going to be considered too moderate. The wild card on here might be someone like Jon Stewart if he actually was interested in running. We've seen Trump shake up the Republicans. Bernie tried to shake it up for the Dems, but he was just not quite successful at overcoming that establishment. So maybe a dark horse like Jon Stewart could actually fill that void. There's obviously a few similarities between him and Trump, so this is definitely going to fluctuate over the next few years. We'll have to see what Harris does. Does she run for governor of California? Does she go into the private sector? Does she do do something else, but she did have that burst of popularity after Biden dropped out. Before that, she wasn't really all that popular, so I still am a little bit surprised that Democrats are so excited for Harris. It didn't seem like they were extremely excited before Biden dropped out, so it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with Harris as well as the rest of these Democrats. Some of them might become more relevant, some of them might fall off the map entirely. So that's the Dems. Now, what about the Republicans? Well, given they're going to be the party in power, it's going to be challenging for them to try to succeed Donald Trump. It's going to be a lot easier to answer this in 2 or 3 years when we see how the Trump presidency is going. If he wipes out or if it's mediocre, then it might not matter who the Republicans put up and the Democrats are going to be favored to win. But if Trump is moderately or seriously successful, then who the GOP nominates is going to be very important. The obvious frontrunner so far is going to be J.D. Vance, the VP. But among these GOP primary voters, he is only at 30%. I think he has a lot more room to expand once he gets into office. But the highest percentage here is actually undecided at 51. Given Trump sucks all the oxygen out of the room, filling a void in a post-Trump world I think is going to be a tall order. But Trump's endorsement I think is going to pull a lot of weight. And if Vance runs, it would be hard to imagine Trump not endorsing him unless there's some kind of huge falling out. Now after Vance, you've got some familiar characters. You've got Ron DeSantis, who ran in 2024. There was a moment right after the midterms where DeSantis was at his peak and it looked like he could potentially be competitive with Trump. But I thought once he actually got into the race, it wasn't going to work out at all and he was going to fall flat. And it is what happened, but he could theoretically run in a few years. He's going to be young, he's governor of a key state, and he's not totally dissimilar from Trump. So DeSantis at 5% along with someone else. After that, you've got Vivek Ramaswamy at 3%. In that primary, it seemed like Ramaswamy was the most similar to Trump, but he was unable to get any traction given Trump was actually in the race. But it's going to be interesting to see if Ramaswamy maybe runs for an office back in Ohio or if he just stays in the Trump orbit, but it does look like he could have a future in Republican politics. Nikki Haley is on here at 2%. I think she's easily going to be the choice of the more establishment and neoconservative voter, and given that she's not going to be in the upcoming Trump cabinet, her best political days may very well also be in the past. RFK Jr. is on here also at 2%. It's tough to imagine him actually running as a Republican. But you've got some other interesting candidates on here. Tulsi Gabbard. Elon Musk is even on here at under 1%. But you even have Glenn Youngkin on here who's also at under 1%. He was somebody that seems like he could have potential in the GOP, bridging that gap between the Trump wing and the establishment wing. So that's the Republicans, but there's one other funny thing here to point out here underneath. It says respondents who listed Donald Trump, which was 23% as their nominee, were reclassified as undecided due to his ineligibility to run. So that is hilarious stuff. It's going to be wild to see what happens in that post-Trump world. So what about a few of Trump's cabinet nominees? Well, Marco Rubio for Secretary of State has 45% support, 32 opposed. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for the Health and Human Services Secretary, 47% support, 40 opposed. Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence has 40% support, 33 opposed. Those two I think are the most polarizing from what I've seen in the media. Democrats, even some establishment Republicans are saying they don't like Kennedy or Gabbard. And then we've got Dr. Oz here for Medicare and Medicaid Administrator, 41% support, 37 opposed. I think Oz wiped out in that Senate race a couple of years ago in Pennsylvania, but that technically has nothing to do with this role here. Then they changed directions a little bit here. It says a plurality of registered voters, 39% believe there will be another world war, while 26% do not think there will be. 35% are not sure. I'm assuming that's within the next 4 years, but if you break it down by each side, 46% of Harris voters believe another world war is likely compared to 33% of Trump voters. The rest of this poll is pretty much just about aliens and the holidays. And then at the very bottom here, you can click full results to get a more detailed breakdown on some of these questions. So that's this Emerson poll. There was also one from Morning Consult that came out last week. This also looks at the 2028 contenders just for the Democrats, and it says 62% of Dems say Harris should play a major role in the party moving forward. So this does seem a little bit more favorable for Harris than the Emerson poll. If we go down here to the full list, Harris gets 43%, then it's way down from there with Pete Buttigieg at 9, Gavin Newsom's at 8, Tim Walz is at 7 in this poll, Josh Shapiro is at 5. They do not have Bernie Sanders on this poll, but would not vote is at 6. So a lot of these names like Josh Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer, we've been hearing about for the last several years. Maybe it matters at some point, but for right now, after this election, it's going to be Harris that has the commanding lead. Now down here, we've got favorability ratings for these candidates, and this is just from Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents. The sample size here was 1,012 voters. So Harris has a massive 88% favorability rating. Tim Walz is at 73. Under that, you've got AOC, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Pete Buttigieg, and Gavin Newsom all at 50% or above. Now after that, you start to get more people that don't know who these candidates are. The bottom two are going going to be governors of Maryland and Illinois, Wes Moore and J.B. Pritzker. And I'm sure whoever is the nominee, winning back control of the White House is going to take the highest priority. But the last thing we've got here is Harris's support among different demographic groups for 2028. Her best group is going to be black voters at 60%. Then it's going to be 18 to 34-year-olds at 54. Her worst two are going to be the highest educated groups, postgraduates and bachelors. She's down there among the low 30s with those groups. So some interesting stuff there. Some of this I would expect. There's a couple things I didn't. But that's a quick early look at what's going on for 2028. I'm sure we'll be looking more into it in the future. But for now, let me know what you think of any of this data. Is Harris going to remain the frontrunner for the Dems over the next few years, or is she going to fizzle out? What about for the Republicans? Is it going to be J.D. Vance, or is it going to be somebody else? Let me know down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.